Today, we are gonna make a midi skirt. A midi skirt is a great wardrobe staple. You can also change the length on this pattern. I'm gonna go over all those details, but it is such a great wardrobe staple. You can put pockets on it, you can put no pockets on it, and this pattern also has a slit up the back as well. So that way it's easy to walk in. We're also going to be putting in an invisible zipper with a waistband. The great thing about this pattern is that you can change it easily to be your style. I'm gonna show you how to make it a straight skirt or flare out so that way it's not a pencil, and you can put pockets on it, and I'm gonna show you how to size it to your measurements so that way this skirt fits you just how you want it to. So let's go check out the pattern and go over all of those details. The first thing you need to do is print out your pattern. There's two choices for download. You can download the print shop copy or you can download the letter home printer version copy. So whatever version you want to do is totally fine. So either print it out at home and tape it all together or send it to your copy shop. Next, we need to take your waist measurement, so let's go over that real quick. The skirt sits at your natural waist, so I want you to measure your natural waist, which is generally the smallest part on your body here. So this dress form is 27 1/4. And then I want you to go down to the biggest part for your hips. This can differ on people, so just measure the biggest part of your bottom here. And this dress form is 37. Now that you have your waist and hip measurements, we want to take a look at the size chart. If you're enjoying this video today, make sure you like and subscribe to Sew Anastasia. And if you're already a subscriber, well, thank you for watching today. And if you're looking to improve your sewing skills, make sure you check out my online sewing classes. There's a link down below in the description. And if you want to get more involved in the Sew Anastasia sewing community, make sure you check out the Sewing Club. You get a new sewing pattern every single month with all kinds of great tutorials and such, and you get to join the private sewing Discord. So check that out, link down below in the description. Now back to the midi skirt. Now I want you to find your waist measurement in the chart and circle it, find your hip measurement in the chart and circle it. If both of your measurements are in the same size, then you can go ahead and just cut out that size or alter just that size. But what do you do if your waist is a 10 and your hips are a 14? Well, I'm gonna show you. So this happens a lot in size charts. All of your measurements don't fit perfectly in one size, right? Totally okay. I'm gonna show you how to work around this. It's super easy. It's all about blending from size to size. So remember, we're going from a 10 to a 14. So go to the hem of the skirt and I want you to find which color and what line variation is going to be your size. So I know that this blue line here is my 10 and this purple line here is my 14. And now we're going to go up to the waist. So I put a little X on the blue line here, which is my 10, and the purple line here, which is the 14. Since for this example, we're going from the 10 in the waist and a 14 to the hips. So we need to make sure that we blend from the waist down to the hip of the 14. So now we need to find the biggest point of our hip. Now this is different on everybody. Generally speaking, it's about 9 inches, but I'm going to show you how to measure yourself so that way you can find it for you. We're going to measure it from our natural waist at our side seam down to the biggest point for your hip. So on this dress form here, I would say it's about 8 inches down. So now I need to find on my pattern 8 inches down from my waist and put a mark. So in this case, you would mark down 8.5 inches because we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance already in the pattern at the waist. So if you're adjusting this pattern, just add a 1/2 inch to that measurement. So we're gonna measure down the 14 line and put a little mark. So we need to find where 8.5 inches would be. So we just want to walk our ruler until we get to 8.5 inches. And then we're gonna put a little mark. So now we need to connect the 10 in the waist to the 14 in the hip. So I'm going to use a straight ruler first and just connect those two. And since we do have a curve in our hip here for the pattern, we want to grab a French curve and go ahead and add that curve in there. And it's just a slight curve, so nothing too extreme. And you can see I just added about a 1/4 inch out here in the middle of the line and then blended it from point to point. And now we have a new cut line in our pattern, so your skirt would fit you if you're a 10 in the waist and a 14 in the hips. You're also going to need to blend the waist to the hips on the other skirt pattern piece as well. Or a little hack, what you can do is cut this one out and then lay it on top of this one, so that way you get the same shape in the hip. This technique also works in reverse. So if you need to make the waist bigger in the pattern, but the hip is fine, you can just blend from the hip out to the waist measurement. That's you. And this will work for any combination of sizes. Now let's talk about the style of the bottom of the skirt. This pattern naturally is penciled at the bottom, but if you want to come straight down or flare out, I'm going to show you how. First, I'm going to show you how to make your skirt straight so it's not penciled. To do this, the best tool you can use is an L square. Now what you want to do is line up your L square with either center back or center front, and then make sure that it's right at your hip point. So let's pull up that L square to the hip point. Make sure it's perfectly along center front or center back, and then draw a line across your pattern. So now we have a hip balance line. Now you need to flip your L square so that way we can line up the short edge with our hip balance line. Make sure it's nice and straight. And then we're going to draw the side of our skirt, which is going to make it straight all the way down to the hem. And now you'll have a nice straight skirt because this is your new cut line and it's nice and straight. Now I'm going to show you how to adjust the pattern so that way you can have a nice flared skirt. The first step is drawing the lines for the straight skirt. Now that I have my straight skirt line, we can decide how much flare to add out from it. You can add as much or as little as you want, depending on the flare you'd like. I'm going to add 3 inches. So I'm going to mark 3 inches out from the hem. And now I'm going to blend up from the point at the hem up to the hip. And now we have a flared skirt. If you flare just a little bit, you can just keep your straight hem at the bottom. If you added a ton of flare, you're going to have to curve the hem of your skirt a bit. If you need to make a curved hem, I want you to measure your line from the hip point to the hem. So this one here is 22 and a half. And then let's say you had a really large flare that you were creating. You want to make sure that your 22 and a half is over here from the point, and you'll start to see, if you just mark all the way back down to the straight part of the skirt, that it's going to create a bit of a curve. And that here is how you would add a curve to the bottom of your hem if you made a large flare. So if you're doing a straight skirt or you're doing a flared skirt or you're just adjusting the waist to hip measurement, you need to cut out that first pattern and lay it on top of the other one so that way you end up with the same shape at the side seam. Now that you have your pattern adjusted just how you want it, it's time to cut it out of paper. Now that you've adjusted your pattern and cut out the paper pieces, it is time to lay out our fabric and cut out our fabric. Today I'm going to be using this really fun brocade fabric for my skirt. So I'm going to be cutting my pattern directly out of my final fabric because I've already sewn up some samples and fit this to me, so I know the pattern's going to work. So sewing a mock-up is a great idea. So grab some muslin or some inexpensive fabric and try out the pattern first, so that way if you have any adjustments you need to make, you can make them before you move on to your final fabric. This isn't something you have to do, but it's something professional dressmakers do, and it's a great idea. So I have my fabric folded together and I have my selvages lined up. Now we're going to place our pattern pieces on. Our front skirt is on fold, so that's going to go all the way over here on the fold. Our back skirt is cut too, so that's going to go over here right next to it. And then our waistband is going to be cut one on the fold, and I'm going to place that down here. So wherever it says fold with these 2 little arrows pointing towards the edge, that means you need to place the pattern on a fold. So now let's cut out our fabric pieces. Before we cut out our fabric, make sure you are weighting down your pattern. I like using these old irons, or I have some industrial pattern weights. If you don't have something like that at home, you can use soup cans, books, anything that's heavy that you have laying around the house. Some people like to pin their patterns, but I don't recommend doing that because it actually scrunches up your fabric and your pattern, and it gives you some inaccuracies. Also, instead of using scissors, I highly recommend a rotary cutter because you're going to get nice, smooth cuts. Just make sure you buy a mat that you can use the rotary cutter on. But if all you have is scissors, that's totally okay. Just make sure you weight down that pattern. So I checked my grain lines and we are good to go. Okay, we are all done cutting out our skirt. So these are all of the skirt pieces you should have cut out. We should have our front skirt, which was on fold. When we open it up, we get the complete front skirt. We have our back skirt panels, which you should have 2 of them because we're going to have a center back zipper. And then we have our waistband piece up here. Now that we're all cut out, it's time to mark our notches and our darts. You're going to notice these little marks on your pattern. These are your notches. They're alignment points, so that way we can sew our pattern together properly. I like to use a notcher, but if you don't have a notcher, you can just use a pair of scissors. So we are just going to basically cut out that little spot where the notch is. And you're going to do that everywhere you see a notch on your pattern. You're going to have 2 notches for the dart on the back. You're going to have a double notch at center back. You're also going to have a single notch lower. That's going to be for our vent on the skirt. And then on the front skirt, you're going to notice 2 notches at the waist for our dart. And you're also going to have a hip notch on the front skirt as well. We also need to punch a little hole where our dart tip is. So go ahead, find the size for your dart tip. Take an awl and push it through so that way you get a little hole there. If you don't have an awl, you can also use the end of a safety pin. So now you're going to turn your fabric wrong side face up, and we are going to place the pattern on, and we are going to mark all of the notches and the dart point with some chalk. Also make sure you weight your pattern when you put this on, and make sure everything is nice and lined up. And then take some chalk and mark all of those spots. And for the dart point up here, just take your chalk, go right over that little dot, and then you're going to have a little dot on the other side. So when we remove this, there's our little dart point right there. Now that you have the 3 spots marked for the dart, you can draw in the dart. So let's line up the notch with the dart point. Draw a line on one side, and then do the same thing for the other side of the dart. Now we have our dart marked for the back panel, and you want to do that for all of your darts. Now that we have all of our darts and notches marked, we need to cut out a little bit of interfacing for the waistband. So go ahead and use the same waistband pattern and cut out some fusible interfacing. You could also use sew-in as well. Make sure you choose a thickness that is comparable to the weight of your fabric. So I have my interfacing all cut out, and we're going to make sure that the glue dots are on the wrong side of the fabric. So flip your glue dots over on the wrong side of the fabric and line this up. You'll also notice that I made my interfacing piece a little bit smaller than my fabric piece, so that way my fusible interfacing does not risk getting on my muslin when I'm ironing. So it's always a great idea to cut your interfacing pieces just a little bit smaller. So we're going to place our muslin on top of our interfacing to protect our iron. Steam it down. And just like that, our interfacing is attached to the waistband. And while I'm here, I always like to iron my waistband in half because that's going to help us later. And now we're all done ironing. Now we need to finish all of the edges of our project. So you could serge it, you could zigzag it, you could overcast it, you could bias bind it, you could use pinking shears. I'm going to be using a serger today. So whatever method you prefer, go ahead and finish all of the edges of your skirt pattern pieces. Now that all of our fabric pieces are cut out, prepped, and ready to go, it's time to start sewing. And our first sewing step is going to be sewing up the darts. You should have 4 darts marked on your skirt to sew up. We have 2 darts on the front panel, and then we have 1 dart on each back panel. I have my dart folded right sides together. I have it pinned up. Now we're going to start sewing at the top waist of the dart. Make sure you back stitch. And work your way down that chalk line that you drew. Very gradually make it to the tip. Come off by 1 stitch. I like the back stitch and cut. And now you should have that dart nice and sewn up. Now I'm going to sew the other 3 darts the same way. All done. My darts are all sewn up, but now we need to iron them. The front darts get ironed towards center front, and your darts on the back get ironed down towards center back. I've got my skirt on my ham because it has a little curve to it. And now we are going to make sure it's nice and flat, and we're going to iron the dart over to center back. When we do this, you're going to notice how nice and flat our dart is, and it's super smooth into the fabric. And you're going to do that to all of your darts. Our darts are sewn in, they're looking great, and they're giving us some shape. Now we're going to sew up our side seams. We're going to place our skirt pieces right sides together, match up those notches, and let's pin up the sides and sew them. So I have my notch lined up here with the notch on the other side. So we're going to make sure that we pin that together right there. And then I always like to make sure I get a pin up at the waist. And then we're going to work our way throughout the side seam, making sure our edges are nice and lined up. So that way we get accurate seams. Those line up really nice. Now I have both sides nice and pinned up, and we're going to sew it up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the top and the bottom of this seam. Now we're going to move on to the other side. All done with our side seams. So our skirt is really coming together. It is in one piece now. Super exciting. Our next step is going to be ironing open the seams. So let's head over to the ironing board and iron them open. I'm going to be using my ham to iron the curves in the hip on this skirt. So we're going to take the seam, we're going to press it open with our fingers, and then we're going to grab our iron and iron open that seam. I'm going to do this all the way down the skirt. And you only need the ham for the curve. So when you're done with the curve of your skirt, you can set your ham to the side, flip your skirt around, and iron from the bottom up. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Now we're all done ironing. And if you didn't know, we iron open the seam so that way the edge where the seam is nice and crisp and it doesn't look bubbly. Also, when you're attaching the waistband to the skirt, it's not going to be super dense where the seams are because they're going to be ironed open and not pushed over to one side. Speaking of waistbands, it's time to attach our waistband to the top of the skirt. And since you've already ironed it in half, right now I want you to open it up, and we're only going to sew one side of the waistband to the skirt. To attach our waistband, place your skirt right side face up. Open up your waistband and make sure it's right side face down. Also, make sure it's open. To make sure that this fits nicely along the waist, I want you to pin at one end, and then we're going to pin at the other end. And then we're going to pin within that. Sometimes, depending on the fabric you choose, it could stretch out a little bit at the waist. So just work your way along the waist. And if you need to stretch it a little or ease it into there, that's totally fine. But you shouldn't end up with inches of extra. Now that I have the waistband pinned up, I'm going to sew it together. I'm going to sew it up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. When you get to where your seams and your darts are on the waistband, just make sure you double check them. Make sure the seams are open and make sure your darts are facing the right way. backstitch and cut. Our waistband's attached and it's looking great. Now what we want to do is iron open this waist seam, so that way when we put the zipper in, it's not going to be super bulky at the waist. So I'm going to iron that open real quick, and then we're going to go over putting in the zipper. So I just ironed open that waist seam, and it's going to lay nice and flat on us when we wear it. First thing we're going to do is put the zipper on the left side of the skirt. And what is so important is making sure the top of the zipper is going to be at the top of the waistband. So you should have it ironed right now, and if your crease isn't showing up great in your fabric, I want you to open it up, find your crease, and chalk it, so that way you can really see it. And now what we want to do is unzip our zipper, make sure your zipper is right side face up, and we're going to take the zipper and we're going to flip it to the right side of the fabric. Now you want to make sure that the little plastic nub on the zipper is at the crease on your waistband, or that chalk line that is indicating center waistband. So I've pinned mine in place, and I want you to double check and make sure the seam at the waist in the back is ironed open and it's nice and flat. And now what we're going to do is sew all the way down the zipper, right in the crease of the zipper. So if you take these teeth and you roll them back, you're going to see a little crease in there, and that's where we need to sew. And to do that, I'm going to be putting on my all-purpose zipper foot, and I'm going to move my needle position all the way over to the left, so that way I can get right in that crease. I have my needle started up at the top of the zipper. I'm going to remove my pin, make sure I backstitch, and then continue all the way down to the bottom. And I really like to hold the zipper teeth open to the left while I do this. So as far as you can, and stop before the zipper pull, backstitch and cut. So we have the zipper sewn onto the left side. It is looking so good. Let's zip it up and make sure it's close enough to the zipper teeth. So it looks like our fabric is right there at the center of the zipper, which is great. Now, if you sewed yours up and your fabric was back a little far, you can just go over it again. You don't have to seam rip it. Now, with the zipper zipped up, we want to mark on the zipper tape where the seam line is for the waist, so that way we can match it up on the other side. So I'm going to mark this with chalk right there. And now I know where I need to line up my waistline seam on the other side. Now what we're going to do is unzip the zipper, and we need to flip it right side of the zipper to the right side of the fabric. And we need to make sure that we're lining up that chalk mark with the waist seam. Also, make sure that your seam allowance in the back is open. I always like to put a little pin here close to the edge of the zipper tape, and then I'll zip it up and see if my waistline is matching up. And that looks like it's going to match up well. So now it's time to sew down the other side of the zipper. So we're going to move our zipper foot to the right side, and we're going to move our needle position all the way to the right as well. Don't forget to backstitch at the top. Make sure that seam is open at the waist, and just work your way all the way down. Backstitch at the end and cut. Let's take a look at our invisible zipper. Our invisible zipper is looking invisible just like it should, and our waistline matches up, which is great. Now we're going to finish sewing up center back to that single notch. So that single notch is where our slit starts for the back of our skirt. You want to make sure you're starting up about 1 inch into the existing seam. Backstitch. Keep that zipper tail out of the way and continue down to that chalk mark. When you get to that chalk mark, I want you to backstitch really good, a few times. There's going to be a lot of stress at this point. Once you've backstitched a few times, go ahead and cut. And while we're here, we're going to sew down the zipper tails to the seam allowance. Now it's time to finish up the waistband by the zipper. So we need to take the zipper tail and fold it over to a 90-degree angle. And then we're going to take the waistband and fold it down over the zipper. And when you do this, this top of the waistband should line up with the bottom of that seam there. And now what we're going to do is leave on our zipper foot, and we're going to sew right in the zipper tape, right up this little waistband part. Don't forget to back stitch and just work your way all the way down this little waistband piece. Back stitch at the other end and cut. And now we're going to do the same thing to the other side. I always like to start from the bottom up, so I flip the skirt over, so I'm starting at the bottom. Look at how nice the fabric wraps around the zipper on the inside. It's beautiful. And then on the outside, we have a nice finished top of the zipper as well. We have one more step left in the waistband. Let's finish it up. So right now the waistband is flapping open, so we need that to stay down to the inside. So with that nice and flat, what we want to do is stitch in the ditch. So we're going to stitch right inside of that seam, and then it's going to look invisible from the outside, but we'll have a stitch on the inside catching this other half of the waistband. And if you wanted, you could also create a little edge stitch on the waistband going all the way around if you'd like to see a stitch on your waistband. So when I start my stitch in the ditch or my edge stitch, I want to make sure that I'm about a ½ inch away from the zipper. Otherwise, it's going to be too hard to close up the zipper. Take your needle, pull it down into the seam, put down your foot, line everything up, and here we go. Don't forget to back stitch at the beginning. And keep the little groove on the front of the foot in the seam. When you get to the end, make sure you stop at least a ½ inch away from the zipper as well. Now that our waistband is nice and secure, let's take a look at it. You can't even see the stitch on the outside of the skirt, but if we turn it over, you can see the stitch on the inside where it's holding down the waistband, so it's nice and secure. Now all we have left are hems. We need to hem our slit and the very bottom of our skirt. To do the hem for the vent, we're going to fold under the vent 1/2 of an inch, and then we're going to stitch it down. So you will see a little stitch on the outside, so we'll make a little box going all the way around it. And then after that, we're going to iron up the bottom of the skirt 1 inch, and we're going to put in a blind hem. You could also create a single folded hem here as well. So now I'm starting at the bottom of one of the vents. We're just giving it a single folded hem. When we get back up to where the seam starts, we're going to sew up about 1/4 of an inch. Needle down, foot up, and we're going to turn and sew across that seam to make it nice and strong. Stop on the other side on the vent, needle in, foot up, and turn, and then work your way down the other side of the vent. And our vent is done. So now it's time to hem the bottom of the skirt, and I have my blind hem stitch selected. Your machine should also have this stitch. I also have my blind hem foot attached. So now let's hem the bottom of our skirt, and we are finished. Don't forget to make sure you have the fold in your blind hem lined up in the right spot on your foot. And it's always a great idea to test out the blind hem on a scrap first so you can select the appropriate width. You get to the end, back stitch, and cut. We did it. We finished our gorgeous midi skirt. We have a nice tailored waistband. We have darts. We have a blind hem. We have our invisible zipper and our slit on the back. You should be so proud of yourself for finishing this midi skirt. You did an awesome job. Now it's time to try it on and style it. We have the skirt on the dress form. Let's go over the fit and the details. So if you chose not to modify your pattern, your skirt should fit and look something like this. This skirt is tailored to the body, but you should still have a little bit of room in here so that way you can sit down and bend. We also have a nice tapered fit down to our calves. This is giving us a nice pencil midi. So if you chose to create a straight skirt, it's going to go straight down from your hips. And if you chose to do a flared skirt, it's going to flare out from your hips. And besides those being different looks, they're also going to give you more leg room. And this pattern is so versatile with length. So if you want a mini skirt, chop it off and make it a mini skirt. If you want it to your knees, chop it off and make it to your knees. You can chop it off and hem it at whatever length you would like. You don't have to keep it a midi skirt length. We have a nice structured waistband on this skirt, and it's a one-piece waistband. We have 2 front darts to give us a little bit of shape up here in the hips. And then we have a nice tapered down style towards our calves. In the back, we have our nice invisible zipper, which goes into the high slit in the back of the skirt. Now that we've gone over the fit and the features, I'm going to try it on and we're going to style it up a few different ways. The midi skirt is so diverse. For this look, I've chose a band t-shirt and just some flats. Super casual, day-to-day look with the midi skirt. You could also add your favorite pair of tennis shoes and have an ultra casual look, but you've got a super fun skirt to elevate the look. And for this look, I've paired the skirt with a vintage oversized blouse that I've tied in a knot and some really fun sparkly gold high heels. This look is great for a work party or just going out on the weekend. And for this look, I've paired a chunky oversized sweater with this slim midi skirt, so it really plays with the proportions, and added some fun pink sparkly matching shoes. So definitely think about a sweater with your skirt. So if it's cold out, throw on a sweater with your skirt. You don't just have to wear jeans. Also consider pairing a bodysuit with your skirt. This takes it from day to evening like that. Add a fabulous necklace and you are ready to go. You can also pair a blazer with it and wear it into the workplace. This is a great, fun work look and you get to say you made it. I hope you enjoyed watching me style the skirt a few different ways. Fashion is so fun. The sky is the limit with how you can style something. Thanks so much for watching Sewing Anastasia today. If you have any questions on creating this midi skirt or modifying it, leave it down below in the comments and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. And don't forget, you can download the pattern at sewinganastasia.com for your home printer or the large format version and send it to a copy shop. And if you're not already a subscriber to Sewing Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when all these new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. These videos are for you guys. And don't forget to follow me on all the socials so that way we can stay connected and creative together. And if you're in Chicago, come on into my design studio and take some sewing classes with me. And if you're not, well, we now have the online sewing academy, so make sure you check that out. There's going to be links down below for those. And there's also a sewing club where you get a pattern every single month and you get access to the private sewing Discord. So make sure you check that out too. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.